Hi there, my name's Robert Wrixon. I'm the Executive Director of Nordic Resources Limited. We're focused on copper and nickel exploration of major scale in the ultramafic central Lapland Greenstone belt of Finland.
Rob, good to have you here.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, been here long?
A couple of days
Right.
already, yeah. Conference, couple of days into this Resourcing Tomorrow conference. It's been pretty good so far.
Looks busy over there.
It is busy. It is busy. A lot of people. I think expecting a little bit of an uptick in the market. I would say, nickel, for example, which is one of our commodities of major interest, isn't flavor of the month. But I think these things always turn around. But there's a lot of copper upside where we are as well, and I think that's getting a lot of people's attention.
Yeah, for sure. And what type of people you say? Is it mainly retail at this level, I guess, for you? Is it?
No, I think it's a pretty good mixture.
Okay.
Actually, there's at the conference at the moment, I think I've probably run into more insto investors than retail, and some decent people showing up from the major mining companies as well, which is good to see.
A few car manufacturers too.
Yeah. They're always interested. I think the energy transition, it's coming. It may take a bit longer than people think, but it's coming. And I think the movement over to electric vehicles is, while slower than potentially some people expected, it's also happening. So these guys are always sniffing around for some raw materials that they'll be useful for them.
Yeah, I think that kind of it's a nascent sector in a sense. I'm trying to work out, how quickly this would run. I think people got a little bit carried away and excited, but still 15% year-on-year growth, not too shabby. Let's talk about where you're at. Maybe there'll be people watching and listening to this haven't heard the story before, so just remind us of the asset base.
Yes, well, we have 240 square kilometers of contiguous ground holding in the central Lapland Greenstone belt of Finland. That part of Finland is known to host really good quality copper, nickel, PGM type deposits within the Greenstone belt, within the ultramafics. For example, the Sakatti deposit, which is 44 million tons at 2% copper, 1% nickel. That's really the type of thing we're looking for. Boliden have their Kevitsa mine there as well, which supplies the Boliden smelter down in southern Finland. So there's a lot of activity, exploration and existing mining in that part of the world. So we have the entirety of what we call the Pulju belt, which is a subset of the main central Lapland Greenstone belt, very underexplored. There has been a bit of historic work, which we're trawling through at the moment, and we've leveraged off in our own drill campaign, which we did in 2023, which allowed us to produce our maiden resource.
Okay, licensing up there, people always talk about the difficulty around that. Where are you guys at?
Well, that's. I mean, it's true. It does take quite a long time sometimes in Finland, because there's a lot of legal routes for people to have queries about what you're up to, and these things take time. But I think the great thing about Finland is you know where you're going, and you eventually get there once you do things right. And for us, this has been a process which we knew was going to take a certain amount of time. When we listed, we had one license granted where we focused all of our attention, and we've got a pretty decent resource out of that. But that only represents 2% of our total land holding under application. We now have a second license granted, which wasn't granted that long ago, but it's even bigger and it has a lot of untested targets on it. We haven't had a chance to really do much with it yet, but soon we will have, we believe, another 6 licenses, which will give us the entirety of what we call the eastern limb of the main mineralized zone. And that's 25 kilometers of contiguous strike. And at that point, we're going to have to shift our focus from prospect level exploration, which we did at Hotinvaara very successfully, to regional level exploration. And we're really going to have to do some proper target prioritization, because there's a lot of places.
Right. So, and is there any historic data at all for almost the basis, or you literally?
Oh no, there is.
There is. Okay.
Outokumpu did quite a lot of work in the 80s and 90s.
Right.
Mostly at Hotinvaara, which was where we have now our deposit. The deeper drilling was there, and we've put an extra 16,000 meters into the ground on top of the 10,000 meters Outokumpu did. But up and down the main part of the belt there at Pulju, there has been some shallow regional drilling, which will provide a lot of information as we go through that information now. But there's also been a lot of base of till which is effectively geochemical sampling data, which we just put out some results about Monday this week. And there's been a lot of other sort of geochemical sampling methods, and there's obviously some regional geophysics, but we are looking to do some much more detailed geophysics.
Right. But what's the game plan here? Because obviously, tight market for nickel companies, you know, it has been through a rough couple of years.
These things come around, though.
Well, I'm told reliably that they will do.
Cyclical market, the definition of it.
In Q1, guys. But you've got to finance the work that you do. So you've got to be quite efficient in markets like this. You mentioned targeting, obviously a priority for you. That's a very large land package.
Yeah, it is. It is. And, you know, full disclosure, we are running a process with some deeper pocketed groups that will help us do a lot of this work alongside us. But at the same time, there is work we can do very cost effectively ahead of that. So now that we have what we will have regional scale on our land package where we'll be able to get in on ground. As I said, we're focusing on that target prioritization up and down that part of the belt.
Yeah.
So what that means is going back to the old geochem sampling, the old regional drilling, and in particular, now that we know that the nature of the mineralization is heavily reliant on remobilization, what that tells us that we need to try and find the structural traps, test the size of the system, all that sort of stuff. So it means we need some really detailed structural analysis.
Right.
So that can be done with ground mapping, and there's been a lot of structural mapping already in the belt. We need to put it all together with close-based mag, which we already have done, and close-based gravity, which we intend to do. And so all this is planned, and really that sort of work isn't that expensive. It'd take possibly about a year, and cost less than about $500,000 Australian dollars to get all that work done, and then you put all that together, and then you're going to have some really tight, discrete targets that we can then go say, hey guys, we got to drill this.
Okay,
and we'll be able to raise money for that.
Help retail investors understand this, right? It's not very expensive. It's also not very exciting to retail investors because they don't understand the value of it. So when you talk about these things in the context of targeting, i.e. making your drilling more efficient, can you help retail bridge that gap?
It's true that nothing gets people excited as much as anticipating the results of some drilling.
Yeah.
I mean, there is a world where we get a little bit more funding and we can go in and test. I mean, of course, we know exactly where we'd like to drill. I mean, at Hotinvaara, where we've actually done a lot of drilling, we didn't quite get all the way along that mineralized zone to the main bounding fault, which would be an incredibly good, important place to test. We would obviously, and there's a world where we'll get some funding to do that, so to finish off a lot of and there's not just targets at Hotinvaara, there's targets at Hotinvaara. Confusingly, that's the other license we've been granted that we really ought to test as well, and we've already got targets lined up there, walk-up drill targets. But and if people are, we're talking to strategics about putting some money in, and if that money came in, of course we could do it, and it costs a bit more, and we could have something a bit more exciting. But in the absence of that. And the upside for investors is, look, if we raise money now, it's quite at a downtime in the market. Maybe we don't really want to raise money at this particular time. Maybe we do take our time to build things up properly and carefully. Really have, and that way, when you put the next hole in the ground, you're giving it the best chance to hit those bonanza grades that we're looking for.
Right.
So there's a silver lining to all of this. If we get a chunk of money in, okay, it might be dilutive, but we can go in and drill deep again.
Right. So you want a percentage of something rather than all of nothing.
Correct.
Right. Okay. And I no problem with that, because what we're saying here is you got to be in the game to play the game. There's no point in starving yourselves to death.
Yeah, that's right. No, absolutely. But there's also no need to spend lots of money when you don't really need to. And there's a clear path forward on, yes, what might sound a little bit boring, like geophysics and all this sort of stuff. But the reality is, there has been a lot. There is other work streams going on in parallel. You may have noticed that we just put out our metallurgical test results, and that shows that the deposit we have at Hotinvaara, albeit at a relatively low grade, produces incredibly good and high grade concentrate, and with reasonable recovery. So that work stream can continue, whereby we can continue to fine tune that resource and get towards a scoping study, which is very important from EU funding point of view, for example, where they've said they will fund things if they got to scoping study level. So there are a lot of parallel work streams going on, which may be a little bit more exciting than just the structural studies.
You know, and I wasn't being glib there. I'm saying it's a genuine feedback that we get where people just don't understand it. Why should they? They're not trained. It's not.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you have to try and look past a project the size of Pulju and the size and scale and the prospectivity of it has to be managed properly, and it's not always going to go at 100 miles an hour. And so the reality is it's a journey. And so in order to do this right, you need to be smart when times are tough and it's hard to raise money without being hugely dilutive to shareholders, and we're acutely conscious that we don't want to do that. But we can still progress the projects carefully and get at a speed which we would probably be doing anyway.
Right.
So, I would say, bear with us. We've shown that there's a vast reservoir of nickel under the ground there. There should be a lot of copper associated with this, but it's not in the ultramafic we've drilled so far. So where is it? It must have accumulated somewhere. So in order to try and solve this geological puzzle, if you like, you do need to be patient.
But I think that again, that's the danger of some companies where they go off on a geological hunt. They get super, super excited about the rocks, and they kind of forget the economic side of things. So I'm interested in what you just said, though, with regards to the concentrate, with regards to recoverables, and I guess ultimately what payables could look like in that part of the world as well. So give me a bit more on that.
Well, I think when you're dealing with it is on average a low grade deposit that we have at Hotinvaara, albeit...
Which is another thing people don't understand. We talk about it every week.
So this sort of disseminated nickel sulfide, the great thing is it's nickel sulfide, and the great thing is it's all in pentlandite, so we can produce a fantastic concentrate.
Right.
It's also partially recrystallized, remobilized, which means it falls out very easily. We get pretty good recoveries, and also hence the high-grade concentrate. So we can fine-tune that. We can probably get the recoveries up quite a lot as well, so we improve the economics a lot.
What percentage did you say? What's the percentage of recovery?
We got 62% right off the bat.
Okay.
But with an incredibly high-grade concentrate. So what that means is most of the smelters can take 8 or 9% nickel concentrate. Now, if you're giving them 18, they're not going to turn you down.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you don't have to get that high, if you're aiming for a 10% concentrate, we should be able to get the recoveries up much higher if you don't have to produce that, which we don't have to produce that high-grade concentrate. So there's fine-tuning we can do there. Feed that into some, maybe work a bit further on the deposit. Tighten it up a bit, and then, as I said, go through into a scoping study, just to put a little bit of numbers internally around it. And as I said, we can then start applying for EU funding. And to be honest, when you're talking about something of the scale and prospectivity we're talking about something which is already the largest or second largest undeveloped nickel-cobalt resource in the EU. And we've drilled such a tiny amount of the prospective ground. So if I want to get a lot more tons of this, of course we could continue to drill up the belt. But the thing is, we need to find out exactly what the numbers look like for what we've got. But the thing is, and this is really where I think the EU should be putting its money, because you've got something of the scale of Pulju which can really move the needle for critical metal supply into Europe. Yes, it's early stage, but look at the upside. You've got a huge fertile nickel magma, at least nickel-cobalt magma, and probably copper's there too. This could supply Europe's need for a long time if we can find what we're looking for. So at the moment it's difficult. When times are tough in the exploration space, this is where governments, the EU, should really step in, and exploration is the bottleneck at the moment.
But I can see why they don't. There's been so much value destruction across the sector,
it's risky.
Right? It is risky, and I can see why governments are slow to move because they don't understand it. I'm seeing why industry's slow to move because that's where you lose money and distract yourself. And we've always been able to buy it in the open market. But I agree with you. The EU needs to get its act together more broadly with mining. We're seeing problems, not in my backyard. It's a lot of that, right?
Well, that's for sure.
We need it. We want it onshore, but not in my backyard. Yeah. And how do we get around that? Because it's alternative financing potentially for you. Forget tax credits and all that sort of stuff. Actual cash needs to come into this space.
Yeah.
How do you affect change?
Well, dealing with the permitting issues for mines and all that is something that is definitely an issue, but it's not where we are at the moment. So I'm going to leave that question for others who are further along. But in terms of, I get it. It's hard for governments to pick winners, and it's generally speaking not a great idea for government, let's call it officials, who don't necessarily have a training in the area. to do that. But I think that's where the ideas need to start flowing.
Yeah.
So you can create some sort of an EU fund which is actually run by people who do know what they're doing, as long as they're compensated properly, and there's upside in it for people, so they can contribute their expertise to allocation of public funds, and you can marry that with an element of the market picking the winners rather than individuals by saying, look, if these guys have got some traction, they have, for example, got the attention of BHP, for example, like we did in the Explore program, and say, oh, that's a tick. And then the market, even though the nickel market's really tough, these guys have managed to hold on to a reasonably high market cap and enterprise value, as we have. So, and people say, okay, so these are all good signs for, say, the market is sort of saying that there's something here. And so that gives you your shortlist, and then that's where the experts and the government officials come in and say, what sort of money do you need to get to the next stage of development of your project? And then there's something to be done. But yeah, I mean, it is in public funds. If the EU is serious about really increasing the amount of critical metals that are actually mined in Europe, they got to start doing things like that, especially when times are tough like this.
It's a difficult one when there's potentially vote losing for them. Politicians make decisions based on and I've got a friend who works in the energy transition space. He advises the UK government, he advises the French government. He makes recommendations. So this is the most efficient use of the public's money, and they go, "Thank you very much. We're going to do something over here. We are going to do carbon capture, even though you've told us it doesn't make sense, because we want to create jobs up here." And the same for mining. You can sort of see why the same sort of laboured decision making, no pun intended here in the UK, where the wrong decisions are being made for the wrong reasons. So it comes back to that alternative financing. I think you're indicating that industry's got to step upstream, got to step in and go upstream, where perhaps it hasn't traditionally.
If you mean the ultimate end users of the product?
I'm saying like the automotive
OEMs,
guys, like we've seen them do it in lithium, we've seen them do it in copper, battery manufacturers, those sorts of guys have got to help. They've got money.
Yeah, that's true. I think you have seen a little bit of that you did in the early sort of heady days of this first, of the energy transition becoming the energy transition, or being called the energy transition.
Very fashionable.
And then I think reality bit a little bit. There was some deals done. There may have been some buyer's remorse. I think the end users are still trying to work out what their supply chain is going to look like. Who are the people who are going to source the raw material? I mean, is it the cell manufacturers? Is it the automotive guys? I mean, to what extent do they control what the cell manufacturers buy, or do they just say, give us a battery with this particular battery chemistry, and that's the only input? Now, I think different end users are ultimately going to make different decisions on that, and until they figure it out. And bear in mind, there's still a little debate about what's the ideal battery chemistry, and all this is going on as well. So it's going to take a few years to settle out and each company is going to have to make its own decision. And
it's a funny one. I think car manufacturers are very happy to hide behind recycling. Government's very happy to set targets with actually understanding the full supply chain. In the meantime, companies going out and finding the stuff, the kind of lifeblood of the sector, is struggling to attract the sorts of money it's going to need to kind of move projects forward. Because mines, we know, are taking twice as long as they did, 20 years from discovery through to production. Yeah, it's not pretty out there. So let's come back to you though. You've laid out what you think you're going to do. You're looking at alternative kind of financing, to move projects forward. And 2025 for you looks like what? What are you going to be realistically able to achieve if the market doesn't change?
There's quite a few things we can do. I mean, as I said, we've just announced these great met results. So we need to figure out exactly where that puts our Hotinvaara deposit in the pantheon of lower grade deposits. And I would argue that with the metallurgical properties we have, we're going to look a lot better than some of our peers in that group, and also I think because
we're dwindling peers, it might add.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, good news.
Well, yeah, I mean it's potentially, but I think in general I'd prefer if the rising tide was lifting us all. But I think our other point of difference with regards to the deposit is that it is in Europe. And it's not like other parts of the world which are, blessed with endowments of good minerals in jurisdictions where you can actually mine them. There isn't a whole lot of that. There are some countries where you just really can't mine at all in Europe. Finland is one where you can, and so it's again a very rare asset, scale, prospectivity, and location, in a place where you can actually build a mine. So as I said, so get back to your original point. We will be progressing and further the Hotinvaara deposit itself, and we will be doing all the work on the regional stuff. It may be a little bit boring, but it has to be done in terms of re-logging and to be honest, we are going through all of the old regional drilling, not only by Outokumpu but by Anglo, which was done back in the day. It hasn't really been done before, so we have had a quick look at it, but not carefully, and because when we first raised money at the IPO, we charged straight in and did the drilling that we really wanted to do at Hotinvaara because that was our license. Now that we're going to get these other licenses, we're going to be able to check all these old holes, and it's almost like we're drilling, because all of this information hasn't actually been seen before for a long, long time. So we may find that there's some very interesting results coming from that work. So there will be an announcement out about what we've discovered from the old regional drilling, which albeit was fairly shallow, but still can discover quite interesting things. So the first stage of our regional exploration was putting out the base of till and the trench results, which went out on Monday. And in a couple of months' time, we should have the review of all the old drill results. Okay. And that's going to tell us a lot about where we should focus our attention. And then we'll really be in parallel. We'll be doing all of the work around setting up the geophysics and the structural analysis and all that sort of stuff, which will really allow us to, at some point, have a beautiful splashy presentation which has all of our beautiful-looking targets set up. Okay. And then we'll be saying, now we really do need money. Okay. But what we can do in the next 12-month period is not going to cost that much, which is good.
Okay, good man. Thanks for the update. Appreciate that.
Thanks very much.
We will follow you very closely indeed.
Okay.
Excited for nickel market in 2025, so we'll see where we get to.
Yeah, we will see.